And welcome to another episode of Patriots Fourth and Two. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me, as always, is Mr. Steve Balestrieri. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. For today's episode, we're talking about the Patriots' second preseason game, couple of roster transactions, and right off the top, Steve, we are going to mute our phones um, and talk about probably the biggest headline from last night, which was unfortunately the reason the game was suspended, which was the Isaiah Bolden injury. So let's just start with that right off the rip, Steve. Give me your thoughts on that because pretty jarring reaction from a lot of the players. Obviously grabbed a lot of headlines and really puts an emphasis on. Unfortunately, there was a couple different players for the NFL carted off the field last night on stretchers, which you never like to see. But give me your thoughts on the Bolden injury and kind of how it all played out.
Yeah, watching the game on NFL Plus, I saw the tackle unfold, and it seemed like Bolden was coming over to make the tackle from the sideline. Calvin Munson came from the inside, and Calvin Munson took him out hard. I mean, I saw it as it went live, and I saw that Bolden wasn't moving whatsoever. And then your focus goes from the end of the play to watching the player, because you're hoping, okay, in a second he's going to roll over and bounce up, maybe be a little woozy, but he hadn't moved a muscle. And then I saw the reaction of the players, the doctors coming on the field from the Patriots sideline, and when I saw the Green Bay doctors running on the field, that's when you get that that feeling of, oh
That
boy,
uneasy feeling. Yeah.
this is not, this isn't a minor thing. I mean, to see the Packers doctors running, to help, that's when you knew it was bad, and you start automatically fearing the worst at that point. And thankfully, he was able to fly home with the team, and being released from the hospital. Those are such good
Had
signs.
movement in all his arms and legs.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you know,
that was a huge thing. And I thought the decision to call the game right there was absolutely the right way to go. And kudos to Belichick and Matt LaFleur, because as that was unfolding, you saw those two guys, talking, and you could tell it was serious business there. And I just thought it was a really smart thing to do, and good move on both coaches' parts. Good move from the league for allowing it to go forward. Um, but the big thing is, I'm just glad he's going to be okay.
100%. It's definitely um, like I said to start the show, jarring injury. You could see his body just kind of hit the turf and just wasn't good automatically.
Mm-hmm.
And the way people's reactions wasn't great. So something definitely, we're obviously wishing for the best. Had. I thought he's made a lot of ascensions in terms of kind of gaining some momentum to earn a spot on the roster. So hopefully it's not something that he's out for too long. Obviously his health is obviously first and foremost the most important thing. Really surprised by some of the. I mean, it's hard to tell with some of these things, Steve, but some of the reaction on social, I can't tell if people are just being trolls just to be dicks about the whole thing. But I also am like, well, I'm not really that surprised. Like some people thought it was kind of weird that they suspended the game. And look, if you want to tell me that you're going to cancel the last few minutes of the game and it's a violent sport and the last few minutes might not mean a lot to a lot of people, but it could mean something for people on the bottom of the roster, I'd say, yeah, I guess. I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, I would also tell you that, it is a sport and it's a violent game. And after seeing people's, reactions to that, and I just think, mentally, it's just more important to do what they did. And I thought it was the right call.
Yeah, absolutely. And granted, they cut 10 minutes off the game, but it's a preseason game. It had no bearing on anyone's regular season record or playoff seeding. So that's why I was in firm agreement with just, hey, no one cares what the score is in a preseason game anyway. Teams don't give it. They just want to evaluate their players, and I think both teams are exactly like that. They're not interested in the final score. Of course, they're competitive. They want to win, but it's not important at this point. The important thing is, you want to get your players a good look, especially those guys who, may not get as many reps in practice. But at that point of the game, did anyone really want to continue on? Probably not. So, and plus the fact they had two really intense days of practice against each other, and 50 minutes of game time. I think they had enough.
Right.
So
I totally agree. Just want to go ahead and make a comment here to please subscribe to us on YouTube and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, especially on Apple. Like, share, leave us a review. It keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. And again, please check out PatsFans.com. A lot of great content there with the leader, Ian Logue, there behind the keyboard, the man behind the mask, as we say. Steve, we have a couple of things to talk about, not only from the game, some roster transactions, some injuries, a couple different things. I think we'll get into some of the latter, after the game, but let's focus on the game first. I don't know where you want to start, but I'll let you kind of take it from wherever you want to go. If you want to start from the beginning, aside from the Isaiah Bolden, injury, what stood out to you the most positively or negatively?
yeah, and again, I think that injury kind of threw a blanket over, all the notes.
Definitely dampered a lot of things that happened last
Yeah, I
night.
mean, I had all these notes, and then afterwards, I was like, "Is it really important to talk about this or that?" But that's what we do. So, I thought the offense started off pretty good. Um, they got a turnover from the defense. It was a really bad snap. Jordan Love had the ball sail way over his head. It was recovered by the Patriots on the 21 or 22-yard line. And, they were able to punch it in. But what I really liked was, the offense looked in sync at first. Um,
I'm happy you're starting with this. Go ahead.
huh?
I'm happy you're starting with this. Go ahead.
Yeah, because, this was the first look we've had with Mac Jones and the quote unquote starters. I know there was still some people missing. With the Bill O'Brien offense, and to see them, granted it was only a 22-yard drive, but to see them punch it in, that's something that they struggled with a year ago. And
It just looked like I don't want to say a well-oiled machine because it was a short drive, but it just looked like a functional offense, which so many times last year
yeah,
it looked like they were making it difficult on themselves on purpose. That's
yeah,
like hard to do. And again, I want you to continue and we'll kind of expound on it from there. But I thought at times last night it just looked like they're running some inside zone RPOs. I thought at the beginning, a couple different formations. Mac looked like he was in control. Guys looked like they were kind of where they needed to be. I just felt like it was a small sample size. And I know they have a long way to go, and they're probably not where a lot of people want them to be. But I thought that there was a little bit of a glimmer of hope there, Steve, that you saw last night, and what we were all kind of hoping to see, which is like, okay, can we just have Bill kind of, and I mean O'Brien, get this offense back on track? And I thought you saw hints of that last night.
yeah, absolutely. And to me, I thought one of the best things of the drive was Kendrick Bourne is again part of the offense.
And he looks like he's poised for a big year, Steve.
Yeah,
I thought he had a couple of nice blocks. He had a couple of good catches. I just thought he looked. He says he's in the best shape of his career. He looks like it. He looked fast. He was getting open. There was, some nice separation at the top of his route. I mean, there was a lot of good things to really like from Kendrick Bourne.
yeah, and that to me was a big takeaway because that was the first drive, and they went right to him. He caught that one on the sideline, and then nice slant pass, put them down inside, the red zone there, and that whole sequence. Again, then they get the ball on the 1 yard line, and they punch it in with Ramondre Stevenson. I breathed a sigh of relief there, because I'm like, okay, this is what we wanted to see with Bill O'Brien's offense. And I thought they looked really good. And, granted, it was only a 21-yard drive, but that's where they got the ball from their defense. And you'll take that in any given week if your offense, their first possession is on the other team's 20. So I don't fault the offense for that. I thought it was a good drive. And then things kind of took a turn for the worse because of the offensive line again.
Yeah, the offensive line we're going to get to. Let's stay positive, because everyone who listens know how positive I am on the show. I want to stick with the receiver position. We saw Pop Douglas get a couple of catches. I still think Anthony Ferkshire has a chance to make this roster, Steve. I think he's that third tight end that's really kind of peaking on that roster bubble, especially with the Mike Gesicki injury, which we're going to talk about here after the game. So that's something to keep an eye on. I thought Kayshon Boutte was another player last night that I thought really has kind of come on more and more over, say, last 2-3 weeks, where he seems like he's kind of stacking days and plays and games together. And, 2 catches, but, we've talked about him on the show. We talked about him after the draft. It's a player who was, a sixth rounder that a lot of people thought was going to be a first rounder, a high first rounder at one point. If you think about the careers of some of the wide receivers that have gone through LSU, you think about Odell, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Kayshon Boutte got to 100 catches in less games than all of those guys, the fastest in LSU history. And I'm not saying that he's going to be on par with those players. The reason I'm bringing that up is because if he can kind of, regain what he had prior to some of those injuries in college, which I think you saw a little bit of last night, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. But I think that he could, really make an impact on an NFL roster. You saw some explosiveness. I thought the play he had for the touchdown, I thought was a great route, showed good hands. He did have some drop issues at LSU, but he's been better from, reports out of training camp. I thought he showed some good burst there at the end, Steve. Again, I don't want to make too much of it. I think there is a very legitimate chance they hold 6 receivers on the roster for the final 53. I'm not sure if you and I will do a 53 projection. Maybe we'll mess around with it, next week sometime. But I would have him on the roster right now, because I think if you cut him, he's going to end up somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. After, it self-admittedly, really slow start to training camp. He started stacking those days together. The main thing, we were all looking for was consistency, because every day he'd make a splash play or 2 here or there, but we wanted to see him keep doing that and doing it more often. And I think he's starting to do that. I mean, we saw at the end of camp, and he had some good moments in the joint practices, and that slant route at the end of the half there, it was a great play all around. I thought Zappe really zipped the ball in there. And, we saw that burst of that player he was at LSU. Not saying he's going to do that on every down. I'm not saying that. But, you have to be encouraged by what you saw. It was in a game situation. He got that separation, and then he blew everyone away. I mean, he went into the end zone easily, and And I think he's making a case for himself. I wrote this morning, with Tyquan Thornton injured again, he's making a case for them to carry 6 wide receivers. Now, depending on how bad the injury is to Thornton, maybe right after the initial 53, they put him on short-term IR, and Butte takes his spot.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real possibility, and he's showing that maybe he's after the injury and a real bad year last year, maybe he's coming around.
Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely something to monitor. I think that he has done a good job, kind of like I said, stacking things together. That's all you can really do. I think we all expect kind of 5 guys, at that position, but I think 6 is making a strong statement, and I think it's something that we could be talking about in terms of, stashing a couple veterans and saying, "Hey, hang around for a week. Don't go anywhere." Where else do you want to go, Steve? I mean, we could go offensive line. I mean, before we switch over to defense, if you want. I mean, the line is incredibly frustrating. I really think that the team will be better. I think you and I have said this for a while now, that we think and I won't put words in your mouth, but we think this Patriots team could be better than last year, could end up with a worse record because of the schedule. But I'm starting to wonder if the offensive line could be the undoing of this team. We all didn't understand why tackle was not addressed as much as it was over the offseason. They either need to have somebody really, really step up that we're kind of putting some unrealistic expectations on, or I'm not sure, but I'm really worried about the line.
Yeah, and it's one thing if they were all out there and they're just not doing the job, but they're still, 2 guys shorthanded, and it's like, okay, it's getting to that crunch time now. I do believe that they're going to scour the waiver wire, or perhaps even make a trade. I don't think a trade would be out of the realm of possibility here. People keep mentioning the Bengals have, a disgruntled offensive tackle. And again, I don't know whether there's any teeth to those rumors. If I was Cincinnati, I'd be loath to get rid of a viable starter, regardless of whether he's playing or not. But because you never know, when injuries pop up. But again, I do think that what we see right now isn't going to be the guys that they roll out week 1. I think they're going to make some changes here. I think they have to. And, but
do you think that's like a veteran acquisition or someone who's cut on another roster?
it could be either or, depending on who, who the player is. But I wouldn't be shocked if they made a deal for a vet.
Yeah.
And we know when you will eventually come back. And
Who's the guy? Who's the guy for the Bengals?
I'm trying to think of his name.
Is it Andre Dillard? I think it's Andre Dillard that people for the Bengals have been talking about potentially being someone that could be available. I'll look it up here in a second. This is bad podcasting. But yeah, I think something could give there because it's not great. Not great at all.
No. And, near the end of the game, I thought the run blocking improved. Granted, it was against the backups in the second half, but, it seemed like they were starting to get that push, at least in the running game. And that was nice to see. I mean, J.J. Taylor, Kevin Harris, Zappe ended up scrambling for the touchdown, but they were getting that push. In fact, I was listening on my way home. I was listening to a little bit of the game on the radio, and the Green Bay radio announcers were pretty complimentary of the Patriots' run blocking at that point, which was surprising.
So this is why we don't do things like what I just did, because it's not Andre Dillard, it's Jonah Williams. I can't remember if they're the same draft or not, but Jonah Williams played at Alabama and hasn't really had the career
Success.
that people were projecting him to have. But some people were talking about him being potentially available for Cincinnati. So I don't know. I mean, you're grasping at straws, but I still don't. I'm happy with Christian Gonzalez. I think we talked about this over the phone this week, as you and I often talk. And I still. I'm happy with Christian Gonzalez. I still think he's going to be a very good player. I still think they got an excellent value, and it was a position of need. I'm still a little shocked they didn't take a tackle higher. They really didn't address it. So, yeah, I don't know. Something to keep in mind. Let's switch to defense. Not sure where you want to start, but I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned Gonzalez. I thought he played pretty well.
He did.
Excuse me, the COVID is still not all the way
The
gone
COVID
yet.
cough is doing you some damage right now. You all right?
Yeah, but sorry about that.
No,
I thought he acquitted himself pretty good last night. I like what I've seen from him, and he's very competitive. Some of the backups had their issues again. I thought their backup slot guys, we heard in the joint practices that they were having problems, and it reared its ugly head again last night. They gave up I think it was a 42-yarder out of the slot. So,
yep.
Those are the kind of things that they'll tighten that stuff up. I'm not overly worried about it, but it's just something to keep in mind, especially with with Jonathan Jones out.
Yeah, he's been out for a while now.
Yes.
I know that I've seen a couple of things that people have said, "Oh, don't worry, he'll be ready for the season," and he might be. But I mean, the longer it goes on, you wonder, okay, he's ready for the week one. Well, what happens if it's like a soft tissue injury and he just tweaks it again, and then he's on short-term IR. So, I mean, they can't afford to lose him. They don't have that depth there at all.
No. And especially with Marcus struggling a little bit.
Yep.
In training camp this year.
And Jack Jones's legal situation, which we'll talk about here shortly. So, I mean, that's a house of cards, that whole cornerback position. I mean, cornerback, tackle, just really, really not great. I thought overall a couple of guys really, have stepped up. I think Jeremiah Farms has kind of flashed a little bit in both preseason games. We're not there for all the practices. We don't get to see, kind of behind the curtain, quote unquote. I think he has showed a little something on a defensive line that, has a couple of different, I think, categories of players. I think he's someone to kind of keep an eye on. We both like Joshua Bledsoe. I thought he flashed once or twice last night. Miles Bryant made a play or two. He kind of, it's funny, it's like I know everybody hates Miles Bryant, except for Bill. He clearly has pictures of Bill, or might have pictures of Linda. I'm not sure what he has, but clearly there's a reason he's on this team. But I just know that they just love him, and every once in a while, it's like he makes some big plays, and you're just kind of like, okay, well, I guess that's what it is.
He's their zone guy,
right? And that's kind of his role. I mean, he's too small to play corner. He really is more of a safety, but he's more of like a defensive back if you were to like make like a general, classification. And he needs to be in like a dime zone package. Like that's really his role.
And yeah, and when he gains the ire of the fans, including myself, I've been very critical of him. It's when he's in man coverage, because that's not his strong suit.
No, can't do it. He cannot do it.
But I still believe that he's going to be on the roster, at least at the outset of this season, because as you said, Bill trusts him and Bill likes him.
Anyone else stick out to you defensively?
Well, there was a big run last night that when I watched it unfold, and it's just one play, and I probably shouldn't be harping on it, but when we talk about Josh Uche, his problems being a 3-down player was setting the edge, and he let that slide last night, and that was when the Packers, I think it was a 24-yard run or maybe 27. But that was one of the little things I took away. But I was actually surprised that they didn't get any sacks last night.
Yeah, they really couldn't do a whole lot. And it was actually funny because the announcers for the game, I was watching on NFL Plus as well, and they kept mentioning how the Patriots pass rush is like much improved. And I think at one point they were talking about how it could be the best pass rush they've had in over a decade, and couldn't do anything. Jordan Love couldn't do a thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and then during joint practices, they were getting a lot of pressure on Love,
Yep.
And that was one of the talking points that, it would have been this many sacks or whatever, but they weren't able to generate any last night. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, the defense is going to be terrible. But, it was just one of those things to take note of that they have to do better on next week.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I thought Sean Wade wasn't horrible. I don't really expect him to be on the team. I could see him being on the practice squad. I thought he played a decent amount last night. Wasn't bad overall. I think a couple of people, flashed. But again, I thought it was this is going to sound bad, Steve, but I thought overall it was kind of a milquetoast night. There really wasn't a whole lot going on. Is there anything I'm forgetting, or do you want to step aside, take a break, and then talk about some of these roster transactions and injuries?
Yeah, I mean, let's do that, and then we'll get into what's happening and besides that. But yeah, overall, like I said, the injury kind of threw a wet blanket.
It did
on a lot of the analysis that and notes that I was taking during the game, because I'm like, okay, we'll have talking points, and then that happened, and it was like, is it that important right now? And at that time, the answer was no.
No, I totally agree. All right, let's step aside here for podcast purposes, and we'll be back right after this. And we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Again, Derek Havens, Steve Balestrieri, coming at you talking about the Patriots week 2 preseason game. Steve and I kind of went through offense, defense a little bit. But we do have some transactions to talk about, Steve. One of the bigger ones was Ezekiel Elliott signing with the team this week. Something that I'm going to go ahead and break my arm patting myself on the back so hard. But if everyone else here remembers, I'm pretty sure I said 2 weeks ago before the first preseason game that if Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong didn't have really big games, that there was Ezekiel Elliott would be a Patriot by next weekend. And I'm pretty sure he signed Monday. So I was 24 hours late. Okay. I apologize. But don't say I didn't warn you. He's coming back or he's coming to the team wearing his number 15 like he had from Ohio State. I think this makes just so much sense, Steve. Low money deal. I think it's around a $3 million base, a lot of incentives. Good compliment to Ramondre, who had just a ton of touches last year. I didn't even know it, and we talked about this on the phone earlier this week, but he had the 4th most receptions of any running back in the league last year. Obviously had a ton of carries. The Patriots were the worst team in the red zone last year, had a ton of problems down there. And you're talking about, okay, yeah, Stevenson's going to be your bell cow, but Elliott can come in, spell him on occasion, keep him fresh down the stretch. He's an excellent red zone back, does a really nice job kind of finding a nose for the touchdown, and good in pass protection. I think it makes a ton of sense, Steve, and I think this was the only thing that made sense for them.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, because when it comes to their running backs, they always insist that they're very good pass blockers, and Elliott has always been that.
Yep.
He's always been a very good pass blocker. Now, he's not the explosive guy that he was earlier in his career.
He has a lot of tread on those tires.
Right. But if you look at the strengths of his game, those are kind of like where the weakness is not so much weakness, but where Ramondre can improve. And that's the short yardage thing. And Elliott's still outstanding in that. I mean, he had 12 touchdowns. So, I mean, that short yardage and goal line situation, I think he'll excel in that. And, when he's on the field, especially with the offensive line having issues, as we've been saying all spring and summer, he'll help, in pass protection. So that'll help Mac Jones quite a bit. And, he can still move the rock. He's just not that explosive guy, but, I think it'll help Stevenson, where he's not going to be bogged down with so many carries. He'll probably be a little more explosive this year. So I think this is a win-win for the Patriots. And everything we've heard so far, it's been very positive. Stevenson is 100% behind it. So,
well, I think sometimes less is more. And, I think Stevenson is, one of the most important players in the entire team, but there is something to be said about keeping those, kind of keeping his snaps from a manageable, perspective. And I thought last year you saw him wear down. You saw Matthew Judon wear down. You can't just lean on guys that hard for 4+ months and expect them to go ahead and put the same production out there week after week after week. And that's where I think Elliott comes in. And I think he's gonna be a welcome addition. I thought it was pretty much a wrap from the moment that it seemed like him and Mac Jones were meeting in, I want to say, the Seaport area for dinner a couple weeks ago. But I again, good addition, made sense. So I am all for it. I think from an injury standpoint, Steve, I want to say the Patriots have been, I'd say, relatively fortunate to this point. Haven't really had too many bad issues for long-term injuries. But Mike Gesicki was in a tackling drill. I want to say it was Calvin Munson, if I'm not mistaken, who grabbed him in practice. And seems like some kind of like minor shoulder dislocation. I've seen some AC joint issue. Not to be that guy, because I hate that guy, but if you've ever had an AC joint injury, it is painful, very painful. They're hopeful for week 1. It could be longer than that, but it looks like they dodged a little bit of a bullet there, Steve. But give me your thoughts on Mike Gesicki and his shoulder injury.
Yeah, that was definitely news we didn't want to hear about, because he seemed like he was, getting that chemistry down with Mac Jones. And that's what we were looking for in training camp and the preseason. So he'd be ready to go week 1. But it didn't work out that way. Luckily for them, it was considered quote unquote minor, although when it comes to shoulder injuries, I don't think anything's minor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it wasn't as serious as it could have been. But hopefully he'll be ready to go. And because I think he's going to play a really big role in the offense this
right
year.
I mean, we've been talking about it. I mean, I think he's going to have a huge year. I think in this system, he's going to be very productive. And to hear that he went down is just so unfortunate. I think that worst case scenario, based on what we know now, would be that he misses maybe 2 or 3 games. But I think the more likely scenario is he either misses no games or maybe 1 game, based on kind of what we heard. So all in all, it looks like they dodged a bullet there, but definitely would be a huge blow to an offense that really needs all the help they can get. at this point. Um, Jack Jones is another thing, Steve, I want to roll through. He had his hearing. I want to say, if I have it up, I don't know if I have it up anymore, but his hearing was essentially pushed back. It was supposed to be, I want to say, either the 15th of August, and I think it got pushed back to the 18th of September. Either that or the 18th of August, 15th of September. So I might have switched them, but basically pushed back a month. And a lot of times in the situation, given just what I've read and kind of, people have kind of prognosticated, is that the both sides could be looking for some kind of a plea deal, or maybe his case could be pushed back until the off season after this year. So he should be able to play this year based on what I've read, or they could settle for no jail time potentially, which I think would be incredibly fortunate for him for what a dumbass mistake that was. But I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen. There's been a lot of rumors that I don't really feel super comfortable, kind of talking about, because I just don't think there's a whole lot of a lot of basis there. But I would say that it seems like a lot of people that kind of know more about the legal stuff than I do. Basically, it said that it's either going to be a plea deal or it might get pushed back for a couple of months, which would allow him to play the whole year out, which I think for him would be huge, and for the Patriots too, because obviously you have the legal situation, but we are a football show, so from a football standpoint, would be a huge break for the team that could really, really use him for a position that is so thin from a depth perspective as it is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's let's face it, the defense is a lot better when he's on the field.
100%.
And he's played well this summer. So
do you think that I don't mean to cut you off, but do you think he is a little, I don't want to say overrated because that sounds fair, but I was going to say, do you think that maybe he is boosted up because he's kind of like that, because he creates so many turnovers? I wonder if people kind of like forget some of the bad plays last year, but I thought last year he was really, really taken advantage of a bit towards the end, but he was still taking the ball away consistently. So I wonder if people think he's better than what he really was last year, which I thought was very up and down, but he's an up and down kind of player. I mean, and I say all that to say this, they've had a lot of those players in Bill's system, over his whole tenure here. And there's a lot of guys that, you give a little bit to take a little bit. And, they've had a lot of those guys that aren't afraid to jump those routes. You go back to Asante Samuel, go back to, and I think Jack Jones reminds me a lot of Asante, which is super high praise for Jack Jones. But I just mean, he's the kind of player that, yeah, he will fall for those double moves, but he is looking to anticipate and jump those things. So I think that some people think that his rookie year was like super, super huge. And I'm like, this is kind of who he is. He's going to get burned sometimes, but he also is going to turn the ball over too.
Right. And he's aggressive. And
yeah, extremely.
And I don't think you want to temper that too much, because then you take away the player that he is.
Oh, I think when you do that, I think when coaches do that in any sport to a player, you pretty much strip them of what they're great at. They're not the same player at that point.
No. And I think it just comes with experience and, more training and, with the coaching staff to know when to take those shots, and just don't take them every chance you get, because that's when you kind of run in, you run afoul of the numbers game. But, I thought he had a good season. Yeah, he's, when you're an aggressive ball hawk as he is, you're going to guess wrong and you're going to get burned. The guy from Dallas that everyone raved about for all of his interceptions, he gave up the most yards in the league, but people kind of whitewash that a little bit when they look at, all the turnovers he generates. So I just think he's the defense as a whole is a much better unit when he's on the field. And I like the fact that you could have him, Christian Gonzalez on the boundary, and Jonathan Jones back in the slot.
absolutely.
I like that grouping. I really do. And I think they'll be better because of it.
I totally agree. We have a couple minutes left in the show. I mean, we cruised through the game, the transactions. Is there something that you want to talk about that we haven't discussed already?
Well, again, a lot of talk about Malik Cunningham. They were definitely trying to get him involved in the passing game as a receiver last night.
Mm-hmm.
It did not work out. I was kind of expecting another, scenario like the Texans game where if they hadn't called that last 10 minutes, maybe we'd have seen him
Under center, yeah.
as a quarterback in the last 5-6 minutes. And
well, I guess the other thing we didn't mention too is I was going to say we could see that in joint practices, but the team's not doing the joint practices anymore
no,
with the Titans, which I think we should have mentioned probably off the top. It's Bill decided, hey, you know what, Isaiah Bolden, that injury, they called the rest of the game. They're going back to Foxborough. They were going to have a couple of days of joint practice. Instead, the team's going to practice on its own in Foxborough, and then they're going to travel, I want to say on Thursday for the game. I'm pretty sure the game is on Friday.
yes.
Just kind of more of a, update. Unless something, for people who are curious about the next show, we typically do a show on Tuesday or Wednesday during the season, but I would say for the preseason game, we probably will do a show next Saturday, just to kind of talk about, the game, whatever happens on Friday night. But yeah, no, so no joint practices too. And after last week's game, Steve, to kind of go off your, Cunningham take, I thought he earned looked like some more snaps under center, and they were kind of giving him more of a look, and I think that's where they should keep him.
Yeah, because honestly, they don't know what they have in him yet, and that's what the training camp and preseason is for, to see what you have in this guy. I think they're intrigued enough now that I believe they're going to keep him. I don't think he'd pass through waivers either.
I don't think so either. Yeah, I agree.
So I think they're going to plan on keeping him around and give him a year to develop and see what happens as a quarterback. I wouldn't write him off completely as a receiver right now, but at this stage, he hasn't shown much as a receiver.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think other than that, Steve, we've pretty much touched on everything. As far as final thoughts go, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how I thought Belichick and LaFleur last night handled the situation the way they should. As Steve and I mentioned prior to going live on the show, Matthew Slater is and continues to be an incredible leader for the football team. I thought his comments were incredibly impactful. He always seems to kind of know what to say and how to handle himself. And, I think the team's lucky to have him as a kind of an ambassador. But obviously, hopefully Isaiah Bolden is okay and ready to kind of, again, I mean, obviously health is first and foremost the most important, but I would like to see him get back on the field and see what he can bring, because he's, again, made a little bit of an impact here, over the last few weeks. And then obviously for next week, we'll go through the Titans game and any other transactions and kind of get ready for the regular season, Steve. We're pretty close. We're getting there.
Yeah, it's preseason ends, next Friday night.
It's gonna be awesome. It's funny. It always seems like, as soon as the season's over, it always seems like it's going to take forever before the next one, and then all of a sudden it's the draft and free agency, and then it's like that weird dead period, and there's like that 2-month like gap where it's like, I mean, I like baseball, but I'm even wearing a Red Sox shirt right now. But it's like, man, you just have just baseball on. Just, this, if you're, maybe you're enjoying the summer with your kids or your family, or, you're going to the beach, or if you're in Arizona like I am, you're baking in the sun. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, training camp, preseason, regular season, and you're off to the races. So something, something I'm definitely looking forward to, kind of seeing how this team looks. But I want to reiterate, I think there's a lot of really, really good things that we've seen from the team from to this standpoint, and I'm optimistic about it. But I will say I'm extremely nervous about where the offensive line is, especially when we talk about the beginning of the season and we talk about that week 1 matchup and that Eagles front that is just tremendously stacked. I mean, one of the best front sevens, if not the best front seven in the entire league. And I could see that just going extremely, extremely bad. So in the back of my mind, Steve, I am optimistic. I am excited, but I'm worried about that week 1 matchup more and more and more. I already knew it was going to be a challenge, but I can't get that out of my head.
No, and the Eagles can make really good offensive lines look bad.
Mm-hmm.
And right now the Patriots offensive line is not really good. So it's a legitimate concern. And they have a couple of weeks to get their act together. And if nothing else, they need to scheme something up to help that offense find its footing.
Yeah, I mean, they need Trent Brown back and motivated. They need Cole Strange back from injury, and he needs to look like he was for some of the year last year. I thought he had some bad moments, as a lot of rookies do, but he had a lot of good moments too. We know David Andrews is solid, and I'm still not convinced that they won't move Mike Onwenu to right tackle. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with him, but I wouldn't put it past him. I think that there's a chance he stays at right guard, but if they're thinking if Bill and Matt Groh are thinking that they're not going to re-sign Mike Onwenu for a lot of money, I could see them putting him at right tackle because I think that this is definitely a Boston sports radio take I'm about to say, but if they wanted to keep him, I don't know if they would want to play him at right tackle because then if I'm him and his agent, they're gonna be looking for tackle and guard money. You know what I mean? They're gonna be looking for more tackle money than guard money
Yes.
come when that contract's due. But I also think that might be their best option. I think Connor McDermott is okay in spots. City So has kind of been, up and down. It seems like he's playing better in games than he is
in practice.
Camp, in practice. But Antonio Mafi's there. I don't know. I don't really know what to make of it. Riley Reef. I mean, I don't know. I just think the offensive line has a bunch of question marks outside of really David Andrews. I could put question marks on the entire front. So that to me is what I'm going to be focusing on before the start of the season, Steve, because like we talked about, to bring it full circle back to positive, I really like what we saw from the starting offense for the most part. Again, to start that game, wasn't a long drive or anything, but there were some small things I thought you could take and really be happy with. But as we know that the offensive line can derail those things. So something we have to keep in mind moving forward.
Absolutely. And, let's look forward to Friday night. The Texans, the Titans always seem to have a bullseye on the Patriots when they get together.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be a good test. I think we'll see the starting offense for at least a series or two on Friday because I think they want to try to iron some things out.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Again, I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. Please do us a favor and subscribe to us on YouTube. Leave us a review. Like, share us, keeps us high in the podcast rankings, and helps other Patriots fans find us. I want to go ahead and give a shout out to Russ Goldman for some good content he's been putting out on the same channel. Obviously, those who are regular listeners know he's been putting out some shows. I have. Did you and him do any show this morning, Steve?
Yes, we did.
You did. Okay, good. I hadn't looked at it yet. So, obviously Steve puts out, his Sunday notes, which is very popular. And obviously check out all the information that Ian Logue has on the website too. So we can continue to put out some good content for everybody. But again, for Steve Balestrieri, I'm Derek Havens. Thank you again for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2, and we will see you guys next week.